Trigger warning, there are mentions of imprisonment, death, gunshots, torture, and needles. So, if you are disturbed by any of these topics, I would ask you to please leave now. If you're still here, let us get on with the video. Quirks Swallowed in Shadow, an MHA AU fanfiction, written by Arya VA. Chapter 3, Kids, Experiments, and Quirk Marks. Gyro left the three of them in the room with the other kids. Mizuko didn't know exactly what to do. All these kids were just staring at them, wondering what their next move was going to be. Kazune was the first to step forward. "Hey, guys," she said, slightly waving to them. Most of them didn't respond, but a couple of them waved to Kazune. "Dang, tough crowd," Kazune said. She then turned to Mizuko. "You think they've been through the same stuff as us?" Kazune asked. Mizuko looked at the sea of kids. Despite several of the kids in the front who were wearing regular clothing, a lot of the others were wearing sacks or rags as their clothes, which suggested that they were possibly from orphanages. She didn't want to assume, though. Suddenly, a boy in the front stepped forward. Mizuko walked up to him and noticed he was one of the ones who was wearing the nicer clothes. "Hello there, I'm Mizuko. And you are?" Mizuko asked, extending her hand for the boy to shake. The boy was hesitant at first, but returned Mizuko's greeting as he introduced himself. "My name is Hibiji. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mizuko. You seem to be a lot friendlier than the adults who brought us here. That's certainly a relief," the boy said politely. Mizuko noticed his manner of speech was very posh and sophisticated. Maybe he was from a richer family like Kazune was? Two girls stepped up as well, and then Hibiji turned to them and smiled. "Don't worry, Shala, they won't hurt us. They're not with them," Hibiji said confidently. The smaller of the two girls sighed in relief. "That's good to hear. We were a little wary, but it's good to see our fears were for nothing. My name is Shata, and this is my twin sister Shala. Fraternal twins, because we don't look anything alike," Shata said, introducing them. Kazune joined in on the conversation. "Well, nice to meet you both. And you as well, Hibiji. I'm Kazune," she said happily. She then noticed Furuko standing by herself, and pulled her over to where they were standing. "And this is Furuko." "Sorry, she's quite shy," Kazune said a little softer. Shata chuckled a little. "I understand. Shala acts like she's shy around new people, but she's usually very energetic and bouncing off the walls. Literally," Shata said, trying not to giggle. Furuko gave a slight smile. Shala perked up a little bit. "Still, there are a lot of us here, isn't there?" Hibiji commented. Mizuko looked back over the sea of kids. Most of them were still staring at Mizuko and the others, but a few of them were comforting each other, reassuring each other that they would be okay. She couldn't help but feel bad. Suddenly, the door burst open again. Gyro and a few other scientists came into the room wearing white coats and masks. Mizuko and Kazune looked at each other confused. Gyro didn't say anything. He just looked over the sea of children in front of him and smiled. He then turned to his associates. "Go ahead and begin the first phase. Start with," he said, getting his finger ready to point at one of the kids. All the kids backed up a little. Gyro moved his arm and then pointed his finger at his target. "Her. She'll be first." Everyone turned their heads. The person who he had pointed to at first was Mizuko. Mizuko was terrified. She couldn't move. She couldn't talk. Couldn't do anything. She was frozen in place. "Yes, Dr. Miyasho," the associate said. They then turned in Mizuko's direction and ran towards her. They grabbed her by the arm and dragged her to where Gyro was standing. Gyro lifted Mizuko's chin and smiled. Mizuko, in anger, attempted to bite his finger, but missed due to her being restrained. He shook his finger in pity, and turned back to the associate. "Put her in there," he said, pointing to what looked like a giant cylindrical tube. "Yes, sir," the associate said, and dragged Mizuko over to the tube. Mizuko tried to fight out of the person's grasp, but they were too strong. They put Mizuko on the tube and put restraints around her wrists, ankles, and waist. Gyro smiled as the associates left the tube and went to a nearby control panel. They pressed a button and the tube closed. It was see-through, so Mizuko could see out of it, but she couldn't move, and she was worried about running out of oxygen. Gyro smiled bigger and nodded to the associate. Being given the all-clear, the associate pressed several other buttons and levers. This caused a machine with a needle to come down inside of the tube. It moved around for a while and stopped at the right side of Mizuko's neck. Gyro laughed a little, causing Mizuko to grit her teeth. She looked out and saw Kazune, Furuko, Hibiji, Shata, and Shala holding each other. Kazune was glaring at Gyro while the others were staring at the tube Mizuko was being held in. "Start the injection," Gyro barked to his associate. With the press of a button, the needle was inserted into Mizuko's neck. It didn't hurt at first, but after a few seconds, a burning feeling started passing through her entire body. Mizuko squirmed and started grunting in pain. Then the pain turned into a feeling like she was being stabbed. She let out an agonizing scream, and Gyro just laughed maniacally. This pain went on for several minutes, and there was nothing the other kids could do except watch in horror. After about 5 minutes, the process was done. The tube opened and the restraints were released. Mizuko just flopped to the floor. She couldn't move. Her body was aching and felt so heavy. There was still a burning feeling on the side of her neck. She lifted her hand slowly to her neck and rubbed the spot. That's when she felt it. There was an indent in her neck. Gyro noticed that she was confused about it. "Bring her a mirror, so she can see her new accessory," he said, giving an evil smirk. The associate sat Mizuko up roughly and thrust the mirror into her hands. She turned the mirror to the side of her neck and was mortified by what she saw. There, on the side of her neck, was an indent. It was a black circle with a picture of a wave in the center. Gyro laughed and turned to the other kids. "Oh, don't worry. You'll all be getting a special branding of your own. Don't feel left out," he said slyly. Mizuko now had an idea of what was going on. They were experiments, and there was nothing they could do. 4 years later. Mizuko sat on the floor of the white room she knew all too well. She had just finished her 5th test that day and was exhausted. It had been 4 years since she had the indent placed on her. After all the kids had gotten theirs after her, they learned that these marks were called quirk marks. These marks were what they were experimenting on every day. They were placed on them to amplify their already existing quirks to levels that would never have been possible, and even give them extra abilities as well. But it was a gruesome process. The tests were awful, pushing all of the kids to their limits. Training courses, injections, writing tests, etc., etc. Anything they could throw at them. There was also another part of the quirk marks that terrified them. If they couldn't find a soulmate, someone to share this power and this burden with before they turned 18, the quirk marks would consume their bodies and there would be nothing left of them. They were told this every day by Gyro and whoever was testing them that day. So all of the kids had been living in fear for 4 years. Over 200 kids were brought into the facility on the first day. 4 years later, only 45 of them remained. Mizuko had gotten to know all of the kids during the 4 years she was there. Most of them were all 13 years old currently, except for 3 of them. The 3 of them were older by 2 years, but they stayed with their 3 siblings who were also there with them. Kazune and Mizuko had become best buds during this time. They were constantly trying to encourage each other and the other students to bring them some hope. They were sort of the leaders of the group. Furuko, Hibiji, Shata, and Shala were right behind them, supporting them the whole way, and doing the best that they could. But after 4 years, their hope had died down so much that it was almost non-existent anymore. Mizuko was tired of it all. She either wanted to get out or die trying, but had no idea where to even start. Kazune and the others arrived in the room shortly as it was bedtime. Kazne sat down next to Mizuko and looked at her sadly. Mizuko looked down sadly at the floor. It was hopeless. They were stuck there for the rest of whatever life they had left. Mizuko decided to get a drink from the water fountain just outside of the room. As she approached the water fountain, she heard struggling coming from the main arena. She peeked out to look at what was going on and gasped. In the main area of the building, a winged man stood surrounded by a circle of knocked-out scientists. Mizuko knew right away. It was a pro-hero.